I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Eduardo Conrado, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Motorola Solutions. Eduardo has been a major force behind Motorola's transformation to a purpose-driven culture. While he considers himself a bit of a gypsy, being born in Latin America and educated in the U.S. and Europe, his travels have provided him with a global perspective in business that few others can claim. In 2011, Eduardo was named B2B Magazine's Marketer of the Year. He serves on the board of directors for the Association of National Advertisers and is currently National Board Chairman for the Business Marketing Association, which, by the way, is celebrating its 90th anniversary this year. So please join me in welcoming Eduardo Conrado.
Thanks for the introduction. Well, this is a great venue. I hope if I drift off a little bit when I'm talking, you'll excuse me because it says the views. You guys are looking at me. I'm actually looking out the window as I talked. I think the conference theme is fitting. When we talk about transformation, now and next, I'll tell you the Motorola story from my point of view in terms of how we transformed an 80-year-old company. Actually, 84 we turned last year. And as we were transforming the company itself, we were also looking on how marketing transforms itself. How do we communicate to our customers? What strategies do we have to shift? And the impact that that has on the marketing organization, the content that we create, and then the technology that we use to get that content out to our customers. So as I mentioned, Motorola is an 84-year-old company. About 4 years ago, with the board of directors, we decided to split the company into two separate entities. So through the history of Motorola, we've been in and out of businesses. We started actually as a B2B company, created police radio, went into semiconductors. We actually had, if you go into the Motorola archives, you find Motorola TVs, Motorola stereos. So those were first entrance into the consumer business. We got out of that business. We ended up getting into video, more B2B focused. Invented the cell phone, that got us into the consumer business back again. And then we went full circle, where 4 years ago, we thought that being a $35 billion conglomerate didn't serve our shareholders well. That we needed to focus on core markets, where we could split the company into a 100% to be B2B entity and 100% more or less consumer entity. So that's when we went and looked at the creation of Motorola Mobility and Motorola Solutions. Motorola Mobility got acquired by Google. And Motorola Solutions is the last standing Motorola in terms of being B2B focused. But if you think about the portfolio that we have, we went back to the roots of the company. $8 billion in sales. About half of it goes to government, specifically public safety. So the police radio that we created 74 years ago kind of has multiple iterations into the portfolio that we have right now that's focused on the public safety space around the world. And then the other half of the company focuses on enterprise. So selling to retail, manufacturing, transportation, logistics, mining, and so on. But always on the roots of the company focus on mobility and technology. So once we separated the company, 2 years ago, it was January 4th, 2010, it allows us as a marketing organization to go back and just look outside and inside. Were we taking the right approach? Should we do anything different? How do we treat the brand as being two brands out in the market? How do we treat it out facing to the customer? And then how do we treat it internally for our employees? So one of the things that I did with my team is, as we looked at how's B2B marketing evolving, what strategies should we use as a company in better serving our customers, lining up with the product organizations, and lining up with the channels of distribution? One of the things that I think is that the textbook marketing actually takes away from the marketing profession. B2B is evolving so fast that there's no textbooks, there's no coursework out there that will allow a single marketer to kind of say, hey, you know what, now that I got my MBA, I got enough knowledge to kind of jump into the workforce. So part of the challenge that we have is how do we rely on our agency partners? How do we rely on technology companies? And then how do we rely on other marketers in terms of what they're doing to be able to see what's best in class out there, bring it back into Motorola, and then kind of develop our own strategies on how we approach the market. So a lot of the topics that I'm going to cover today actually talk about this, is as we took the journey of separating Motorola into two entities, is how we evolved our strategy as we went along, and then how that impacted my organization in terms of the shape, the skill sets, and then the tools that we use to kind of go to market. So when you look at Motorola Solutions, we had a 84-year-old brand, actually a little bit less than that, because when Motorola was created, it was actually called the Galvin Manufacturing Company. And it was a few years later where we created Motorola as a brand. So just a little bit of history. If you remember Motorola, and I go back to the historian reports on their marketing, I asked Sue, I said, hey, where does Motorola come from? And we were just inventing the police radio, actually the car radio at that time. And the company name comes from motor and vitrola. And then they thought, you know what, since we got a radio that's going to be mobile, then Motorola came out. A few years later, then the Batwing was created. And then from there, we've been evolving the way that the logo looks like over time. When we split the company in 2010, we said, okay, what do we do to create an identity for Motorola Solutions that is based on the history of the company but looks forward, that it focuses 100% on B2B, that it touches our customers, but at the same time energizes the employee base. Because the worst thing that can happen is we split this company. It was almost 60,000 employees that we had at that time. And if you're inside the company, you go, is this good for me or is it bad? We're getting smaller, more focused. Are we going backwards or are we going forward? Is it good for the customers? And is it good for the employees themselves? So even before the separation, we started kind of working with our advertising agency. And the first thing that we did, we said, hey, you know what? As we separate the company, we got to go and create an external value proposition for our customers. And we worked on it for 6 months. We were almost done with BBDO with the work. And as I looked at the campaign that we were creating, you know, sometimes you don't base, I know that we got to base our decisions on data, but sometimes you get this like little feeling in your stomach that you know that you may be going in the wrong direction. So I had BBDO stop and say, you know what, we got to stop the work that we're doing because I think there's something that's missing on the approach that we're taking. So I went back and kind of talked to my team, went and chatted with Siegel and Gale, which was our brand strategy agency, and I said, hey, here's a challenge that we have in terms of separating Motorola into two entities and what we want to do both internally and externally. So what we ended up creating is actually a brand framework that ties the what with the why. So we did get started with the brand promise, which is what's unique about us, what's the value proposition that we had with the customers. But we actually, when we stopped the work, we ended up started looking inside and actually understanding the why Motorola was around and what the impact that we had on our customer base. So we backed into, started working on the purpose itself. What is the purpose of the company? The why. That kind of tied into the what. What it would deliver out to the market. And as we were looking at that framework, I invited our head of HR to actually start working with us because we were tying in the employees and the customer base. And then two other pieces came out. The voice is just how we communicate outside, you know, colors, typography, video, written voice. But the values were not necessarily the brand values, but the values of the company, which then gets tied into the purpose itself. So when we went through it, we said, okay, the purpose of the company is we help people be their best in the moments that matter. And it doesn't really talk about the products or the technology that we offer, but the impact that we have with our customers. So you take that customer point of view and what is the essence of the company. Then when we went outside and we said, okay, what is the external promise that we have out to the market, it ties back to the purpose. So we talk about Motorola innovates to mobilize and connect people in the moments that matter. So it goes back to the essence, the thing that's unique about Motorola is the mobility and the connectivity, but centered around the customers, centered around that moment. And then the values, we kind of went through, and this one we actually went around the world and did focus groups with all of our employees. And we wanted to make sure that the values were not just a poster on the wall, that they actually came from the essence of what the company was, and they resonated with the employee base. So it talks about innovation, being passionate, driven, accountable, and partners. And actually the one that the employees gave us, they said, hey, you know what, the one that you got missing that you should put in is passionate. So it started out with the management team kind of talking about what are the historic values of Motorola, but it actually bubbled up and got clarity from the employee component. So when you think about us rolling out the framework out to the employee base, out to the customers, one of the things that was an aha moment for me in terms of the role that marketing can play at a company was Shelley Carlin, our Senior VP of HR. She was doing a presentation to in an HR forum, and she sent it to me afterwards. So I picked off this slide from her, out of her pack, which she was saying, hey, you know what? Marketing is the new HR. Actually, we're not, but we're partners on it. The view that marketing can have a big role inside the company as much as we do outside the company is something that a lot of times you miss on the day-to-day in terms of generating leads, generating sales. But the employee base is one of the biggest assets that we have. So kind of creating that purpose, the link with the purpose and the promise, is critical. The other thing that I think that we looked at is, as communicators, if you lead with purpose, you got to translate that into what are the leadership behaviors that the purpose and the values tie together. And that's where HR and marketing kind of intersect. The purpose and the values, then HR translates into a leadership model for the company. So it's not just what we deliver, but how we deliver it within the company. And then similar techniques that we use externally, we can bring back in-house, is how do you use storytelling to inspire the employees and kind of actually articulate what a product enables within the customer set that you have. Being a technology company, and most of us in the company are engineers, we love our products. And the issue is that the products actually impact the customers once they're in their hands. For as much as I love a police radio, they actually get more psyched in terms of what the police radio enables our customers to do. Save lives. Deliver a pair of jeans in the retail space for when somebody's looking for them at the right time. You know, get additional revenues for our customers. So how do we create the storytelling capability within the company? So kind of bringing some of the tools that we use externally in the internal component of that. So I think purpose, being a purpose-driven company is key. There's a couple of books out there that I love. Is Roy Spence has a book that's called It's Not What You Sell, It's What You Stand For. And Jim Stengel just wrote another one called Grow that focuses on purpose-driven brands and the impact that you can have. One of them is a little bit more storytelling, the one that Roy has, and Stengel's a little bit more quantitative in terms of the approach. But if you look at purpose-driven companies, you have a platform that motivates employees. I was just looking at a survey this week in terms of employee feedback, and the paycheck, while important, is not number one. It was actually not number two. Is they view that they have something meaningful, that we have something meaningful to deliver. So I think purpose provides that platform. It also gives leaders, and not just the CEO, a personal platform across the board. If you can tie back to purpose, values, you can actually drive business across the board. But I think also something that's very important is companies that are purpose-driven actually outperform the competition in every financial category that you can think about. Revenue growth, OE, job creation. And that's something that I think you can kind of balance the human element of the impact the purpose has with the employee base with actually the longevity of the enterprise long term. So one of the things that I think if you're going to embark in driving purpose and promise inside the company and teaming up with HR, the best way of doing it is just using stories to kind of bring it to life. And we use multiple tactics within the company. both digital, just physical, or buildings, the way that we communicated. But one of the things that we ended up doing is that for every customer set that we had this concept of a moment capture. That you take a snapshot, bless you. You take a snapshot on a customer's life, and you take that moment, and then you back it into what is the impact that our products or our solutions have in that customer's life, so that you can translate technology into just something human. So what we ended up doing, we had this in digital format or a book, we used this with our board, is that on any given day, moments matter for someone somewhere. So for each of the segments that we serve, we actually broke data into specific moments. This has to do with hospital technologies that we have on what a second means to a stroke victim. So the faster you get information, the faster you can get a patient into the emergency room, what does a second mean to that patient? What does a minute mean? What does multiple minutes mean in terms of neurons that are lost within that snapshot? So we kind of translated technology into people's life, but actually into the impact that it has into each of the customer sets, just more to humanize the approach that we were taking. Now, once we got done, I mean, it was very busy for about a year, and then a year after, kind of getting the promise out to our customers, the purpose and the values within our customer base. So we said, what do we do next? Where do we go next with it? And my team and I started kind of looking at just what strategies should marketing have to tie back into the business objective. So one of the things that we looked at, and being a technology company, we said, what's reshaping the world that we live in? And in many of the solutions that we sell, we have either a number 1 or a number 2 market share. We're a technology-driven company, so we pride ourselves on innovation and kind of having the best products out there. But is that sufficient to maintain that position long-term? So one of my team members said, hey, you know what, there's 3 things that are actually driving the market that we're in. There's more complexity in the product portfolios that we have. So for every vertical that you look at, it's not a single product. There's a huge portfolio that serves it. But the differentiation to me is not the product. It's actually the solution of the portfolio that addresses their need. So more complex portfolio leads into more complex value propositions. So how do we address that challenge? The growth areas that we have in each of our segments is actually attracting non-traditional competitors. And you said in your opening remarks, there's a whole new set of competitors for every company that comes in there. It's not the traditional competitors that disrupt your market. It's the guys that get in that you don't even notice, that come in because it's an attractive market to be in. So we were seeing that in our space, just non-traditional. We're getting the low-end competitors coming in at being more price-driven. And at the high end, we were seeing integrators, software companies, just new approaches on doing business. So how do we address that? Is that a threat or is that an opportunity? And then lastly, being a technology company, we hate to see this last one, but actually having the best technology doesn't mean that you're going to win the market. There's many other factors that will drive market adoption, market growth. So when we were kind of looking at all the pieces, Shamik Mukherjee from my team, let me back up. I had them write white papers. So my team's members hated this at the beginning. I said, hey, we got 4 imperatives that we got to go challenge. And I asked them, I said, each of you as a team, write me a 10-page white paper on how we're going to address it. How do we address the product area? How do we address the go-to-market component? How do we address our platforms and our content? And Massimo San Giovanni from Italy, he calls me and he goes, you know what? I haven't written a white paper since I was in college. But what came out of the white paper was some very good thinking. So what I'm going to show you is actually came out of our groupthink in terms of how do we address the opportunities. And one of the things that we looked at is that as B2B marketers, we have to kind of reshape the 4 Ps. If you think about the 4 Ps, they were created in the 60s. I wish I remember the guy that did it. But it was actually the CPG industry that created it. And Who was it? I don't think it was Porter. So when they were created, they were not actually created for high-tech industry and high-tech B2B. So what we ended up doing is dissecting the piece and kind of said, okay, what should be the approach that we take as a marketing organization for each of the areas, and what's the impact that it has on us and the way that we address the market. So when you think about product, and this is something that both the consumer side and the B2B side we do well. Actually, in Motorola, we do it too well. If you focus a lot on product, it doesn't address the challenge that we have where we said, okay, if our customers values not the product itself, but the problem that you solve for them, how do we change the mindset on that? So we said product actually goes to solution. And we go back and forth on this, and that's why I put a plus in the middle. It's actually product doesn't go to solution. You got to do both of them. There's some products that address specific needs that some of our channel partners sell. But actually, you should almost start with the solution set on the portfolio that we have. And how does that address customer needs instead of the product itself? So you almost start with what are retailers' challenges? What are the CIOs and the CMOs of the retail segment trying to address right now? Well, they're trying to address the threat from the retailers. They're trying to address omni-channel. How do they blend their digital world with their brick-and-mortar world? They're trying to make sure that there's inventory so that when you walk out during Christmas season, you don't walk out with nothing. So it translates to about $100 of revenue loss. So the value that we bring as a company is actually that solution set that addresses the customer needs, but it backs into a set of products that we have within the company. This actually had a profound impact on how we set up the marketing organization. Traditionally, we were set up with product marketers that were in charge of doing product launches. And we can do that all day, to tell you the truth. We can do pretty good product launches on it. But how do you actually then make the product marketers solutions marketers so that you have a knowledge of not only the product set, but also the verticals that we're serving? And then when you go out into the field, how do you create the opposite of the product marketer, which is a vertical marketer that actually starts talking retail, police, fire, T&L, and bridge the two? How do you manage the complexities across product BUs? Because the business units get rewarded based on their portfolio, not how we pull the portfolio together across multiple BUs. So this is something that I think as marketers, you've got to balance both. On the B2B side, you got to be very, very good at the product piece, but you got to be able to elevate it on the solution. The marketing structure will get stressed with this, but you got to be able to be at the global and the field level, kind of matching product to solution to vertical marketers. Agencies also have to change a little bit the mindset. Instead of doing multiple product launches, is how do you create this long story that matches products into solution sets. So I think this is something that more and more you're going to see marketing teams drive to, is this solution set that's very vertical centric, and it's easier said than done because it does impact the way that you organize and you structure the marketing team around the world. The other thing is promotion. So if you're product driven, you're going to be doing promotions all the time. You drive the product, but the flip side of launching products and driving promotions is that you tend to do this. You have all these big waves. You'll peak during the product launch, drive it for a while, but then the next product launch comes out. And if the customers are driven by an issue that they're trying to address, and a solution is kind of centered around that area, then actually promotion has to evolve into education. And the thinking that we got to change is that you're just having a long conversation with the customers. And part of it is hard sell. Part of it is just education. About 4 months ago, we were in Boston, and we had the chief of police come in and talk to us. And they're going through a technology transition here in the U.S. There's new spectrum that's allocated towards public safety, And instead of being voice-driven, it's going to be data-driven, similar to our smartphones. And what he said, you know what? I love that we got the spectrum. Now educate us on what we can do with it. So they're looking at the leaders within the space just to do education. What's possible out there? The impact that you have with that is that the content that you create has to be a mix of product, solution, and thought leadership pieces that are just, you're just educating the market at that point. And that creates multiple challenges. Well, one of them is the agency expertise. The second piece is how do you tie all your content around the world? Because very soon, if you're going to be doing education plus lead generation, you're going to reach a point where the content doesn't scale unless you start leveraging it across multiple sources. You also have to think how the personas within the customer, so retail is not retail, it's the CMO in retail, it's the CIO in retail, it's the operations person in retail. So how do you target the content on that space? So when we look at moving into education, that zero moment of truth moves way out. And the conversation then starts at that point. And then your content, if you're talking about education, then you got to think about content that goes to your sales team, content that goes to your channel partner, and content that goes to the customer. So there's some complexities in how you manage content on moving from promotion-driven mindset to more of an education-driven mindset. The other piece is price. If we talked about solutions, education, then price goes to value. And the challenge here is that for every vertical, for every customer type that you got to have that deep insight, that deep domain expertise to be able to translate their drivers into not just a value proposition, but what is the value for them? So you start with the customer mindset, always, and then translate that into value to be able to be supported by a solution set. So this one's not that hard, but the hard part is having the deep domain expertise in each of the segments that you serve. And the last one is place, right? So a few years back, I mean, if you go, I'm not even a few years back, a couple of decades back, we talked place, it was a storefront, right? Brick and mortar. Then decade back, maybe a little bit longer, place went into .com, the internet. So as everybody was setting up sites, people were going there, then Google came up, so search comes into place. Now, to tell you the truth is you almost have to totally change the mindset, and place just goes to access. You got social, you got marketing automation systems, you got sales automation systems, you got analytics that's running behind them in terms of telling you where to put the best content. So as you look at through solutions to education to value, this is one of the most important pieces on how we view the distribution of the content, the distribution of the assets that we have. And you may have a white paper that you create. You got to cut that thing 5 different ways because you're going to be distributing the same content across different medium. So one of the challenges in this space that I think is an opportunity for the marketing departments is that most of the strategies and the delivery, they're going to be platform IT enabled. So the marketing organization, where a few years back we had more digital marketers come into the organization, that has just totally changed. There were experts on .com. Now if you look at my organization, you got data analysts. You got people that do analytics. You got marketing automation experts. You got Salesforce.com expertise in there. We're dealing with all the portals for the company, internal and external. You got customer data masters in there that are tying into the ERP systems. So the marketers are becoming technologists, and I think the evolution is going to continue to blend IT and marketing because of this, because of just the way that we distribute content and how we architect or access out to our customers. So one of the things that the CIO and I did probably about 2 years ago, we said sales and marketing are working closer together on the systems that we use. So marketing automation ties into Salesforce automation. We got common databases that we're using. So we carved off a chunk of the IT department to say that IT group focuses on sales and marketing. They do sales and marketing IT. And I still have my platform team here. They were the marketing business experts. A month ago, we evolved it even more. We said we can't afford to have two in a box, an IT person and a marketer kind of driving this. It's not that we didn't have the money, it's just we have more projects to put on the team. So we ended up blending the IT group and the marketing department into what we call digital platforms. And it's a blend of marketers and IT experts that report up to my organization, but dotted line into the CIO. So they sit within the IT organization just to make sure that we tie back into their systems. But most of the systems that in the future, the way that we view it is we'll architect them, we'll design the business requirements. They're part of an ecosystem to provide better access to our customers. Most of them are going to be software as a service. There'll be somebody else that'll be building them for us. And what we got to make sure is that they tie back into all the other platforms that we have within the company. This is going to be one of the areas where I think the marketers are going to find the most stress, is that as you define your strategies and changing the approach that we take, as we change the way that we tell the stories to educate the market and our customers, is how we re-architect our IT systems, the front office of the company. And you're going to get into spaces that marketers have never gone into before. So my team that works in this area, like I said, we're very comfortable in .com. And then we got into marketing automation. Then we started looking at the whole front end in terms of how we touch our customers. That got us into all the portals. So when you look at the private and the public domains that we have out in the company, it's the marketing team that's driving that in terms of how do we architect it. As we started looking and said, hey, you know what, we need to get this 360 view of the customer, that got us into driving the customer data master for the company, which is a space that marketing usually doesn't get into because you're touching the Oracle system that the company has. Then that got us into, okay, how do we tie Salesforce.com into marketing? So this is one of the areas where I think marketing will continue to evolve, and marketing will have a voice in, if you do it right, in the way that the systems get architected. So when you think about the evolution of marketing over time, I think we can never forget that a brand is driven by purpose and the promise to our customers. And that's the foundation in terms of what we do as marketers. But on top of that, we got to build an organization, a strategy, tactics that I think evolves the 4P. So this product and solutions, you're always going to have that. I think it's going to be a challenge that we're going to have to manage this. What do we do at the single product level? How does that tie back into a solution that is centered around addressing a customer issue, a customer problem, customer opportunity that's out there? The promotion to education, I think that's just going to force us to have a long-term view on how we communicate to the customers. Some of them might be product, but at the end of the day, it's just a long conversation you're going to have with them. And that education's enabled through the last point is the access, is how do you architect your systems. That's why you're seeing such a push in marketing automation, but marketing automation alone doesn't enable that long-term education. I think it gets you halfway there, but it's how you architect all the front office systems, how you personalize, how do you drive your databases off of that. So if you fast forward 2 or 3 years and you look at the marketing organizations, the makeup of those organizations, they're going to be vastly different. And you see a lot of data points out there. You see, I don't know if it's Forrester and Gartner of the world saying, hey, you know what, the CMOs are going to have as much money as the CIO. I'm not sure about that, but I'll tell you, I think we're going to be investing much more of our budgets on architecting the access out to the customers. I think the marketing departments are going to have a much bigger voice on defining what the front-end architecture looks like and the systems, where the CIOs will have a big voice on what the ERP looks like. I think the marketers are going to have a big voice on what the portal strategy looks like in terms of the systems that engage with the customer base. That will then have a big impact on how the marketing organizations views the creation of content. And it'll put some stress on the agency partners. A few years back, I was telling our large agencies, I was like, guys, you can't present to me a TV commercial and a print campaign if you know we're going to be implementing it in a digital mean. You got to get savvier on the digital front. So fast forward a few years, the digital companies then kind of got into the creative space of the traditional advertising agencies. Now, you have this whole set of tools now that is brand new. Marketing automation, sales automation, bunch of IT tools out there that will stress the digital companies themselves because there's a whole new set of components that then come into play on how marketers deliver or content out there. So those are some of the things I think that's been on my mind, on my team's mind over the last couple of years, not just on how we structure the brand framework, on how we communicate internally and externally, on how we work with HR to create that excitement within the employee base that would ultimately have an impact on our customers. But you got this whole other sort of things beyond the brand that I think we got to get savvy at. So I think it's exciting, challenging, I think stressful at times because there's some things that you don't know what you don't know till you get there, and then you'll figure it out, right? So that's where we're at Motorola Solutions. I think we're in a journey on just changing a little bit how B2B is done. It impacts people. It definitely impacts processes inside the company that then go across functional areas. And it impacts the strategies that you take on the digital side and the platform side. Because ultimately, if you don't get that part right, the strategies are hard to implement. That's it for me. So I'll open that up to Q&A. I'm not sure if I ran over or under, but timekeeper will let me know back there. Thank you.
So, Eduardo, I have a question.
Yes, Tom.
So, actually, I'm going to be greedy and ask two. The first question I had is very pragmatic. So the whole idea of purpose-driven brand, purpose-driven marketing, purpose-driven company, I think it's really important. I think it's great. How does that play with certain, there's certain internal constituents that are more cynical than others, right? So a sales organization, for example, especially coming from a product-centric background.
Yeah.
How do you sell that in so that they, I could just see the sales guy saying, you want me to go out and sell purpose, right? And I sell products, I don't sell purpose. So how does that work?
So when we were working on the purpose, we actually had the CEO and the head of HR working with us and the agencies in terms of coming up with something that was the essence of who we are as Motorola. We also had the rest of the executive team participate on the discovery phase. At some point, and I wish I could pinpoint the date. At some point, it ended up a company initiative and not a marketing initiative. Because if it stays a marketing initiative, then yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to drive change within the culture. So I noticed that the sales guys were pitching with purpose, using it in their presentation. The HR guys definitely embraced it. When you see the evolution of the product team start talking solutions around the verticals and kind of addressing what our customers do, that's where I think you get the success. And you got to pull the teams in very early to avoid that it's just a marketing project, because then it goes to this point. You get cynical crowds inside the company. I don't think you're going to capture 100% of the people, but if you can capture the hearts of a good chunk, it becomes contagious.
So my greedy second question. What you're describing, given the interrelationships, functional interrelationships, all driven by purpose and so on, as a marketeer leading your marketing organization, how do you try to manage the complexity? So analytics, platforms, tools, purpose, brand, et cetera.
So I think you got to have a long-term vision. I mean, long-term is not 10 years, right? So it's a 2 or 3 year horizon on what you want to accomplish. And if the organization If you choke the organization with too much change at once, I think you get almost come to a standstill. I think you almost got to do on a quarterly, 6-month implementation plan on what capabilities you're gonna try to implement. I think the one part that I didn't touch on, the biggest challenge beyond the IT component, to tell you the truth, is change management. Yes, as you're going to transformation, is how do you get people to change the mindset, change the process, change their approach? And I think if you're a small organization, it's a little bit easier. As you get bigger geographically, it gets harder. And if you extend into multiple countries, then it gets a little bit harder. So sometimes you take change management for granted, but the pacing and the change management piece are critical. Howard.
Thanks. Hi. My question was related to Tom's in the sense, Eduardo, that you kind of positioned this presentation as the transformation of marketing, but when you look at it, it's actually the transformation of the enterprise. And I've had the benefit of hearing you speak and your CEO speak about how marketing is really not viewed as marketing, but really as part of the enterprise leadership. So if you have to look back, because I think that that's very much, kind of the future of what companies need to do, and you talked a little bit about it, what were the inflection points. But how do you go about really thinking beyond marketing and really thinking at the enterprise level and how you transform the enterprise?
So your question is a great one. A few years back, I would get the question is how do you get marketing sitting on the executive team table? How do you get the CMO to actually be a CMO that's on the executive team, not reporting to sales or any place else? And when I think about it, if you view marketing as a communication function, you won't be able to transform the enterprise or transform the way that marketing operates on it. So then you start thinking, okay, what's the role that marketing can have? So one of the big ones is the culture piece. A lot of times you think culture, who owns culture? HR. Actually, marketing has the best tools to be the culture igniter, culture revolver within the company, if that's even a word that exists. But that's where I kind of think, I started thinking, okay, you know what, marketing can play a bigger role. Then you start thinking, if the front office of the company, in terms of how we interact with our customers, at some point, the marketing team started being the smartest people in the room when it came down to those platforms. So then you go, you know what, then we can move the enterprise forward in that area. So I think there's a set of skills and a set of tools that we have within marketing that allows us to kind of drive change. Analytics is another good point. So the quants of the companies, the analytical teams, in most cases, the first groups that will put them in place will be the marketing organizations, just because of the information that we get out of the websites, out of marketing automation. As soon as you step back and you say, hey, we're going to run broader analytics within the corporation, what analytics success will be driven by is not by the appliance that IT brings in. It's actually by the strategy that you define to solve a business problem. So then marketing can play on the analytics space for the broader organization, kind of driving some change in that area. So I think depending on which organization you're at, you start seeing that marketing can actually play a bigger role than where we traditionally see ourselves in a sandbox. And then you become almost a change agent within the company. Any other questions? All right, thank you.